Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Julia Grantham, and I'm the manager of the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation's collectible bookplate program. And today we are launching our brand new bookplate, a very special bookplate, which I'm sure will produce a lot of interest and a lot of reaction. And I'm very privileged to be joined here today by the artist who's produced this unique bookplate for us, a silhouette artist, Charles Burns. Welcome, Charles. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Also, most importantly, thank you for contributing to our growing collection of bookplates. And your contribution is truly extraordinary, in my opinion. So thank you very much for it. And we will be revealing it during this interview today. I know that lots of people probably have met you, people especially who love Jane Austen and Regency and all that finery of that time. They probably have met you at Bath Festival.
Yes.
Because you have been a frequent visitor of Bath Festival. At least when I've been there, I've met you there several times. And it is quite a privilege, pleasure, and a rare opportunity to have your silhouette produced quite in the same way as they did it in Regency times and times before that. And I wanted to ask you, how did you happen to become a silhouettist? I don't know whether to call it profession, vocation, but how did you find it, or how did it find you?
Whether it's a profession or a vocation is actually quite an interesting question. The question about how I became a silhouettist is something everybody wants to know, because it is such an obscure and niche profession. And I suppose I do call it a profession, although it has taken over my life completely. So perhaps in some ways it's a vocation or a calling as well. When I left art college and I studied painting at Wolverhampton Art College many years ago. And when I left art college, I worked for a number of years as a street portrait artist in Covent Garden in London, originally drawing portraits with a pencil. And whilst I was doing that, I didn't so much discover as I sort of happened across the art of silhouettes. There was an artist, a Spanish artist, who visited Covent Garden one summer, and he was making silhouettes, and he didn't really do very well in the market, and I could see that the reason he wasn't doing very well was because they weren't very good silhouettes. But he was convinced it was because, and the way he said it was, the English don't understand my work, I can't make a living here. And he got fed up and left. But when he left, it sort of left me with this idea that this was an art that I knew about. I think everybody knows about silhouettes. Everybody is conscious of having seen them somewhere. But I didn't really know anything about them. And so it was a revelation to me that he was just trying to cut them out with scissors. And so when he left, I had to go doing it myself. And it was that little moment which somehow I embarked on a journey, which, over 30 years later, I'm still, is still immersing, it's still become an immersive part of my life. And today, I've very much become the silhouettist in a way that I never imagined I would when I first picked up a pair of scissors and had to go at cutting my first silhouette.
I know for certain that I've only met one other silhouettist in my life when I was 7. That was when my first silhouette was cut in Crimea in Ukraine. And wow. I've never ever met any other silhouettists.
We are a niche group, yes, and immediately you say that, because I am naturally very obsessive about silhouettes. I immediately want to know more about this artist in the Ukraine. You know, who
Yeah,
was he or she, and do you still have the silhouette
I
somewhere?
still have the silhouette. I promise I'll find it. When I put this video together, I'll put it in. But yes, I still have the silhouette, and he was doing it. He did several sheets of paper in different colors, and he cut them
Oh,
through them all. So you
mm,
had, I think, 4 silhouettes.
yeah.
So you could send them to your grandparents and things like that. But I've never met anybody else. Are there any other silhouettes in the UK?
There are a few others, not many. I know of maybe 4 or 5 artists in the UK, and I know a number more in the US, where it seems to be more popular than it is here in the UK. But you mentioned the idea of cutting through several sheets of paper. That's actually a very traditional thing for silhouette artists to do. And a lot of artists tend to cut through at least 2 sheets of paper. I always cut through 2, simply because I like to keep a copy of my own work. So one is for the client and one is for my own records. And that's something which silhouette artists have done for many years. So you may find that your silhouette artist in the Ukraine, when he cut through 4 or 5 sheets of paper, there was, on top of all the colored sheets, there was actually a white sheet which he kept for himself.
Yes.
So, but I've never seen an artist cut multiple colors. That's something unique, and I'm glad I asked you about that,
That's definitely
because
how I remember.
now
Because
I want to try that
yes, I
myself.
have one in blue and one in yellow. Actually, my friend sent me a photograph of, because she kept it, that in
Yeah.
yellow, so she's got it at home. So it's fascinating. And I know that over the years you have done silhouettes of a huge group of people, and I would say people who are incredibly prominent in our times. You've met,
Mhm.
I just looked online, and you have done silhouettes of the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh and Neil Armstrong and Bill
Mhm.
Clinton and Nelson Mandela. And I
Mhm.
mean, it's almost like anyone you can think of. So I'm sure through this length, as you said, over 30 years, when did you start?
My first silhouette was cut in 1989, I think, and I remember that because that was the year our daughter was born, and my wife was pregnant with her at the time. And my first silhouette is of my wife, and I cut it while she was pregnant. So
That
that's
is
why
really,
that date is fixed in my mind. So yes, it is over 30 years now.
yes. And
Um,
I was wondering, I mean, probably there were some interesting, amusing stories you are happy to share with us, with all these
you
people, and
it,
how did they behave when you were
Oh,
cutting their silhouette?
they always behave very well. I'm very good at making people stand still. Um, it's one of the privileges of my job, is because I work in events. I tend to get invited to some very high profile events, but I mustn't give you the impression that my whole life is like that, because it's not. You know, it's quite a nice story to be able to say I'm the street artist who cut a silhouette of the Queen. But in fact, most of the events I go to are not that sort of event. I tend to get invited to company Christmas parties and to business conferences and to weddings and all kinds of things like that, all over the UK and occasionally overseas. But every so often I get invited to some really interesting events. You know, for instance, years ago, I did a silhouette of the Queen at, it was during her 50th, the Jubilee, the
Mhm.
50th Jubilee, the Golden Jubilee of her reign. And there was a lot of celebrations during that year. And, and they had a party at the end of the year. They called it the Golden Jubilee Rout, and it was to finish all the Jubilee celebrations. And the Queen was there, and as were most of her family. And I was told beforehand that the Queen knows she's going to get a silhouette cut out, and that was, I'm very glad they told me that, because had they not told me that, I would quite comfortably have never dared to approach her, because approaching the Queen at an event is actually quite difficult because everybody in the room wants to speak to her.
Yes.
And so when she's talking to a group of 2 or 3 people, you're very aware that there are other people sort of hovering nearby, sort of having their own conversations, but hoping that they're going to be next to go and see the Queen. And so I thought, well, I can't not do a silhouette of the Queen because she's expecting me to do her silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
But socially, the situation was so difficult, but that I had to sort of cut through, you know, if you'll excuse the pun, and go straight into the group of people she was already talking to and interrupt and announce myself. And that was challenging, and my hands were shaking a little bit. And then while I was cutting her silhouette, the gentleman that she was already speaking to tried to make a joke out of it and said, "Oh, Your Majesty, you can use this for the next stamp."
Mm-hmm.
So, and I wasn't sure it was a good joke or not, but that's what happened.
It's a very appropriate joke.
Yes.
I think she could use it for the next stamp.
Yeah.
Yes, and I love the story. I've come across it on Facebook that somebody used your silhouette of Prince Philip when he passed away, and they put it all over London.
Yeah, this was quite recently, and it wasn't a recent silhouette. It was a silhouette I did not at that event, but about 10 years later at the Queen's 80th birthday party. Mm-hmm. And I did 2 silhouettes, one of the Queen and one of the Duke of Edinburgh. And obviously, as always, I kept a copy of that silhouette. And so on the day after he passed away, a company contacted me who have these illuminated advertising display boards all over London. Yes. And they asked me if they could use that silhouette on the board, and they just put it very discreetly on the board. There was no writing, there was nothing about, you know, there was no name or anything like that, no dates. It was just his silhouette, and they felt that the silhouette was so instantly recognizable because he did have a very obvious profile. He's a very easy person to do a silhouette of. And just the silhouette appeared, and they felt, I think rightly, that was enough, that you didn't need to add anything to it. Yes. And a lot of people contacted me, and they took photographs, and they sent me the photographs of these boards all over London and said, "I think this is one of your silhouettes, Charles." And yes, I was very happy. It was one of my silhouettes.
Yes, it must be very gratifying to have your work used in such a poignant but at the same time very recognizable way, and at such an event which was important for the whole nation. So yes, so amongst all these high-profile events you go to, I guess Jane Austen Festival in Bath became one of the permanent spots on your calendar.
It's a wonderful event, and I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it, and I love it because everybody there is in costume, and I always come away from that event feeling that I've cut a set of silhouettes which looked like they might have been cut in the early 19th century, because they all look like early 19th century silhouettes because everybody is wearing that kind of clothing. And obviously the vast majority of silhouettes I cut in reality are contemporary silhouettes of people in contemporary clothing, but those silhouettes are wonderful. And the interesting thing about that is that over the last year, where we've been in lockdown, a lot of people who know me from that event have contacted me and asked me to do online Zoom parties. And a number of those people have been from America, and they've been involved in their own local Jane Austen or other costume societies. And they've obviously been doing their annual conference online. So I was able to go in by Zoom and do silhouettes of them, and the result of that has been that over the last year, I think about half the silhouettes I've cut look as though they could have been cut in 1820, not in 2020. And that seems to me like one of the most obscure side effects of lockdown is that I've
Yes.
done all these 19th century silhouettes during the year of lockdown.
Yes.
It's,
Well, it's interesting you mentioned it, because my next question was what a silhouette artist can do in pandemic, and you are sort of answering that question. So
yes.
silhouettes can be done over Zoom.
Zoom was a revelation to me. Like most people, in March of last year, I'd never heard of Zoom, and suddenly Zoom was everywhere, and everyone was using it. And I've become a complete convert. I'm a bit of a technophobe. I don't get on with technology. I much prefer just working with a pair of scissors and some paper. That to me, that feels comfortable. But if you like, I can demonstrate how to do a silhouette over Zoom. It's very easy. Yeah. So can I do a silhouette of you while we're talking?
I'll be so happy. But how long does it take?
Literally, you'll see, literally 2 minutes, if that. And we can carry on talking while it goes on.
Oh, fantastic.
I need to switch myself to speak of you so I can see you properly. All I need is I need you to be sitting like this, perpendicular to the camera.
Okay.
It's going to feel very strange to you because you'll be talking to me, but you won't be looking at the screen.
Do you want me to put a bonnet on?
Yes, I'd love you to. That would be fantastic.
I'll take my glasses off, and we'll see. I mean, let's do it. So I sit like that.
Sit like that. Yes. Let's put the bonnet on, and you might need to be a little bit further away from the screen. You might need to move a little bit. Yes, just so that I can see the whole
Tell me
head.
whether it's better or worse with the bonnet.
I think the bonnet looks great. That looks fantastic.
Okay.
Yes, just let it sit naturally like that. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay. So I'm going to shorten those ribbons a little bit because they're going right off the bottom of the screen, but I'm just going to make them not quite as long as all that. And essentially what I do with a silhouette is I start at the front and then I cut, and I always cut my silhouettes this way round. I cut up the face. And so I'm working at the moment on your chin, mouth, and nose in that order. And then I go up the forehead. And then I have to go around the bonnet in that order. And I think also, although no one ever taught me to cut silhouettes, I think this is the way silhouettes have always been done. Certainly.
You're completely self-taught.
Yes, I am. When I was working in Covent Garden, apart from the Spanish artist I met earlier, who didn't really teach me much, I couldn't find anyone to teach the art of cutting silhouettes. So essentially, I had to work it out for myself. And it was I did that by going to the National Portrait Gallery in London, and they have a large collection of silhouettes by an artist called Hubert Leslie. And he was also a street artist, or not exactly a street artist. He used to work on Brighton Pier in the 1920s and 30s, cutting silhouettes of people. And he had the habit of, like many artists, of always keeping a duplicate copy of every silhouette, as we discussed before. And he left albums containing about 20,000 of his duplicate silhouettes to the National Portrait Gallery when he died. And so I was able to go and look at these albums, and by studying his work, I was able to work out for myself how the silhouettes were made.
This is amazing.
And essentially, by copying his work, I was able to teach myself to cut silhouettes. So, Julia, you can relax now. You are about done.
Oh wow!
So I'm going to hold this up to the camera, and there's your silhouette.
This is excellent.
And if I put a piece of paper behind it like that.
Oh, that is absolute. You know what? I've got 2 silhouettes done by you, full length, but all with a different hat, never with the bonnet. So
never with. So that's something a little different.
Yes.
But this you see is how I've been working over Zoom, because
that is amazing.
One of the lovely things about Zoom, which is completely different from working from a photograph, is that I can talk to you while you're having your silhouette done. I can tell you if your head is at slightly the wrong angle. I can pose you as if it were a live pose. And
Yes.
afterwards I can show you the silhouette.
Well, that is amazing.
The only thing I can't do right now is actually give it to you. But what I will, but it's very easy for me to put this in an envelope and pop it in the
Yes.
post to you, and you'll get it in a few days. So that has,
I think it was even less than 2 minutes, to
yes,
be honest.
it often is. It often is less than 2 minutes. And for me, the huge advantage of it, and why I say I've become a real fan of Zoom, is because I can do that for people all over the world. It doesn't matter if you're in America or Australia or anywhere in Europe. I can still meet you and cut your silhouette, and afterwards put the silhouette in the post to you.
Well, that was truly amazing. I didn't expect it to be so fast and always so accurate. I mean, that's another thing which is amazing. People very often, if they have their portrait done, they say, oh, it's not quite like me. What I notice with your silhouettes, everybody who I know always says it's so accurate, it looks like me. And I can imagine in Regency times when portrait artists were expensive and not many people could afford it, but this accuracy of the silhouette really helped them to keep the likeness of their loved ones at home.
It's exactly right, and that's what silhouettes were mainly used for at the time. And I think for me, that's what's so enduringly fascinating about the silhouette, is because people sometimes think that cutting silhouettes must be quite repetitive work. And on one level, it is repetitive work. But on the other hand, silhouettes are always individual, because they are as individual as the people whose silhouettes I'm cutting.
Of course.
And so, and as a portrait artist, I'm fascinated by faces, and I'm fascinated by the way people present themselves and the way people stand and how they are as people. And so the challenge of a silhouettist is the same as the challenge for any portrait artist. I've got to try and capture that and put it into the silhouette. But silhouettes are such a minimalist art form. There is, it is almost literally one line and maybe a few holes you can poke in the paper. But so to try and capture all that in a single line is always challenging, and therefore keeps me involved and keeps me active and keeps me engaged with the art. And 30 years on, I am getting more fascinated by it every day rather than less fascinated.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And let's talk now about the silhouette which you've produced for us for Jane Austen Literacy Foundation, and how it all came about. I remember when I approached you about doing something for our book plate, you said, well, the only thing I can think of is to produce a new silhouette of Jane Austen. And of course, it's the best thing you could offer, really, to us. And I know that we'll be showing it in a minute, but I know that there is this silhouette of Jane Austen, which actually I'll share my screen for a second, because I've done, I've created this little presentation, but I'll only show that one slide, because it is very interesting, because it says there, even National Portrait Gallery says possibly Jane Austen.
Yes, and that's because the caption says in French, the amiable Jane.
Yes.
And it doesn't actually identify it as being Jane Austen, and it could be Jane Austen, or it could be somebody else called Jane. There's no way to tell.
And sort of to refer to somebody as amiable could be any. It was quite common, wasn't
yes,
it? It wasn't
exactly,
like
yes.
the one and only Jane Austen. It was
Yes.
It was quite common. So it could be some other Jane. I know that we are using this silhouette widely as the silhouette of Jane Austen, but actually there's no provenance to prove it.
There is one other silhouette of Jane Austen, and that is and that's I think it's a self-portrait that's currently housed in Winchester Cathedral.
Yes.
And that's a life-sized shadow tracing, and that was a very popular thing to do at the time, was to trace people's each other's shadows and then reduce them down to make silhouettes. And what Winchester Cathedral has is the actual shadow drawing, which would probably have been done not by Jane but by a friend of hers while she posed against a shadowgraph screen. And so that silhouette shows Jane later in life and is obviously a more mature woman, whereas this is perhaps a woman in her 20s. I know Jane didn't live terribly old, but I think this silhouette in Winchester Cathedral was probably taken in the last year or two of her life. And it shows a very different person with a much more prominent nose and a much more forceful looking character. So when I created the silhouette, I wanted to bring something of that more forceful character into the silhouette. But I used as my model the recent waxwork of Jane Austen, which was unveiled at the Jane Austen Centre in Bath, which I believe was based on some quite detailed forensic evidence and was based on drawings of Jane Austen that were done at the time, as well as the silhouette in Winchester Cathedral. So that seemed to me like a much better model.
Yes, and it's very interesting about that waxwork because I also read a little bit about it, and it was first created as a portrait, and Melissa Drink, who actually trained both as a portrait artist and as a forensic artist, so she first was commissioned to create this portrait of Jane Austen in about 2001, 2002. And then when it became very popular, she was commissioned to create the waxwork, which we're talking about. And as you quite rightly say, that prominent Austen nose, you know, which you can see in portraits of all her brothers, and that quite thin mouth as well, which you can see in all Austen portraits. I think she managed to capture it quite well, and therefore the waxwork which you've used for your silhouette, well, we don't know, we will never know exactly how Jane Austen looked, but I think it's, to me, it looks pretty similar. And actually our founder, Caroline Jane Knight, who is a descendant of Jane Austen's brother Edward, who owned Great Chawton House, I can see those elements in her as well, and in her father. That'll be actually very interesting to probably commission you to do their silhouettes as well for us.
I would be very happy to. The thing I love about this waxwork is that she looks like such a modern contemporary woman. Yes. You know, she looks like somebody who could arrive at the Jane Austen Festival, a modern woman dressed in Regency garb. Yes. And looks like someone that you might meet and talk to. And that immediately tells me that it's quite realistic. And it's the same with silhouettes, that even if you don't know what the subject actually looks like, you can tell whether a silhouette might be a good likeness by how it reads as a face. You can, if you can see that person as if they might move and start talking to you, then it's a good likeness. It's a good portrait.
Shall we do a drum roll and reveal the silhouette which you've produced for Jane Austen Literacy Foundation to be used probably on our, I don't know, paperwork, but most importantly on the book place. So I'm doing drum roll.
Drum roll. Okay, I shall slide it in from the side, and here she is.
Oh, wow. I'll be honest, Charles, when I first saw it, when you sent me the picture, I literally, it took my breath away. I just, I had that reaction because I mean, obviously people will have different reaction to it. To me, it looked like a woman I know, and it looked like Jane Austen to me.
That's what I was hoping I could capture, because that's the feeling that I got when looking at the waxwork. Yeah. And that was the person I was trying to capture in this silhouette. And obviously, as you said before, no one will ever know what Jane Austen really looked like. But this is my version, and this is what I think Jane Austen looked like, and that's all I can really say about it.
Yes, I can see a woman who knows her own mind. You can see it's a strong character, you know, and as you say, she could be contemporary, but just like her writing could be very contemporary, she captures the human nature so well that 200 years later we still can relate to it absolutely. And I think that all you can see in that silhouette. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I hope that other people will agree with me. Thank you so much. Thank you
That's
so much.
my pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure to be involved in it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it works out, you know, when the book plate is launched, and how it goes. And I hope it raises a lot of you know, some extra funds for your foundation, which does some extraordinary work.
Thank you. And I wanted just to touch upon quickly, because it is very generous of you not only to do the silhouette. By the way, will you be able to donate? I'm sure you have one copy for yourself. Will you be able to donate this original
Yes,
copy for
absolutely.
the auction when we meet again?
Yeah.
We usually have picnics in Chawton during Jane Austen week in Alton and Chawton, and we are planning to have an auction of donations which people give, and we would try to auction that silhouette to raise more money for the foundation.
Absolutely fine. I was planning to send it to you anyway at some point, so yes, I will do that, and yes, I'd be very happy for you to auction it off. Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's not all, of course, because Charles very generously also donates a prize for a competition. For everyone who buys that particular book plate, you can enter, just by buying that book plate, you can enter a competition, which is an absolutely amazing prize, which is a double session. Correct me if I'm not saying it right. It's a double session with Charles, which lasts how many minutes?
Just 20 minutes, but in
20 minutes.
20 minutes, I can cut a lot of silhouettes.
But you can, yes, as demonstrated earlier, in 20 minutes, Charles can cut a lot of silhouettes. So you can, if you are a winner, you can bring your whole family and maybe friends. And because it's on Zoom, they don't even have to be all in one room. Is it correct?
That's true. Yes. Yeah.
So you can bring your friends together or your family together on Zoom and have their silhouettes done by Charles. And you will even post them, won't you?
Yes, I will. Yes.
Yeah. You will even post them. So that's a very generous prize, but that's not all. We have another special prize, which is a code, which I will publish here. It's Profile Jane, but with hyphens in between. And if you book a session with Charles using that code, then you'll have a 10% discount yourself, and 10% will also go to Jane Austen Literacy Foundation. So it's all both pleasure and very, very great help for the foundation. So it's been incredibly generous, Charles. Thank you very much for that.
It's my pleasure, and it, you know, it's a way of giving back. You know, the Jane Austen event has meant so much to me over the last year, and so for me it's a very easy gift to make.
Thank you. Thank you. And there is another Jane Austen event which foundation actually participates a lot in. It is a smaller event than Bath Festival, but it's growing. It's this Chawton and Alton Jane Austen Regency Week, and we do not a huge promenade like in Bath. We do parade for literacy from Jane Austen's house to Great House, Chawton Great House, her brother's house, and also in costume. And then we do a Regency picnic there. That's where we're going to hold the auction. So I hope one day when we all meet again in person, I hope to welcome you there. And,
I very much look forward to it. Yes, that would be fantastic. Yes,
we can auction that wonderful silhouette. But genuinely, I do think that it is a piece of art, and I also think it is an important, for me, it is an important sort of step in Jane Austen related events. Having that silhouette, I think it will live through the years, Charles. I really do.
Julia, it's been my absolute pleasure to be involved in this, and I'm so pleased that this silhouette means so much.
Thank you. Thank you.